I'll be honest. I used to think I had life by the throat. Every morning I'd jolt awake at exactly 5:30 and hammer out emails while the rest of Los Angeles drooled on their pillows. My name's Jeremy Daniels, though everyone at Westlake Financial calls me JD. At 45, I've spent the last 12 years hunched over spreadsheets at our glass tower downtown, chasing promotions with the desperation of a gambler down to his last chip. It's not Goldman Sachs, but I convinced myself it was enough. My retirement calculator said so. My annual reviews confirmed it. Keep everything in its box, maintain the routine, and life would behave itself. But the universe doesn't respect spreadsheets. And this morning, it ripped mine to confetti. I was already 7 minutes behind schedule, sweat beading under my collar as I juggled my phone and a piece of toast. 3 back-to-back texts from Travis about the Henderson portfolio made my phone buzz like an angry wasp. Meredith leaned against the kitchen island, arms crossed over her faded UCLA sweatshirt, watching me with that look, the one where her lips twitch between sympathy and an eye roll. Our daughter, Alexis, yanked open the fridge, the metal bracelets on her wrist jingling as she reached for a Coke. The blue streaks in her hair weren't just blue, they were electric cyan, the exact shade Mrs. Denbright from next door had called attention-seeking at the HOA meeting. Meanwhile, Tanner clutched his dinosaur lunchbox, his sneakers squeaking against the tile as he shifted from foot to foot. His eyes, huge and brown like a cartoon deer, tracked my frantic movements. "Dad," Alexis said, the aluminum can cracking open with a hiss. "Tanner's been trying to tell you something for like 5 minutes. Her voice had that particular teenage tone, not quite angry, not quite bored, perfectly calibrated to maximize parental guilt. I froze, toast suspended halfway to my mouth. Tanner's lips quivered, his science test permission slip wilting in his small fist. My father's face flashed in my mind, not from photos, but from my last real memory of him. Dust-covered hard hat, calloused hands, the smell of sawdust and coffee as he left for the construction site that collapsed 3 hours later. I'd sworn I would be different, better, present, the kind of dad who actually sees his kids. Yet here I was, looking through my son like he was made of glass. Before I could make it right, my phone erupted with that nightmare sound. Not the familiar chime of an email or the gentle vibration of a text, but that screeching, mechanical wail that turns your blood to slush. Emergency alert. Nuclear detonation detected near Los Angeles. Seek shelter immediately. A nervous laugh sputtered from my throat, toast crumbs spraying from my lips. Had to be a mistake. A system error. Some intern hitting the wrong button. In my world, catastrophes meant market crashes and audit findings. Things you could fix with enough overtime and PowerPoint slides. But when I glanced at Meredith, her face had gone the color of old paper, her phone displaying the identical alert. Tanner's lip began to tremble, tears welling. Alexis stood frozen, Coke can tilting in her hand, dark liquid dripping onto our pristine hardwood. What the actual... I swallowed the curse, shoving my phone in Meredith's direction. This can't be real. It's got to be some kind of hack or something. Meredith's fingers trembled as she reached for Tanner, pulling him against her hip. "The news," she whispered, her throat clicking audibly. "Check the news." My hands fumbled with the remote, dropping it once before stabbing at the power button. The TV flickered to life, Channel 4, where Rebecca Miller had delivered the morning headlines with the same practiced smile for 6 years. But now her lipstick was smudged at one corner, and her eyes darted between the camera and someone off-screen. Conflicting reports about an explosion northwest of Los Angeles County. We're seeing... She pressed her earpiece closer. We're getting word that federal authorities are urging residents to... The screen dissolved into gray static, a high-pitched whine cutting through our kitchen. "Dad?" Alexis's voice cracked down the middle, soda forgotten, her fingers clutching the counter's edge until her knuckles went white. "Are we gonna die?" The question hung in the air, suddenly just a scared child in a too big body. The reality hit me like a fist to the sternum. My perfectly arranged life, the daily planner, the investment portfolios, the goddamn coffee scale I'd spent 2 weeks researching, none of it prepared me for this. My hands trembled so badly I had to press them against the counter as I dialed the office. The phone rang 6 times before a voice cut through. "Jeremy!" Lucas's voice was a breathless wheeze. I pictured him, skinny as a whippet, perpetually wrinkled shirts, that ridiculous Star Wars mug he'd brought to every meeting since I'd known him. Holy moly, man. The place is a madhouse. Carla's having a full-on panic attack in the break room. Markowski tried driving out, but the streets are already jammed. Travis is still demanding everyone come in. Can you believe that, prick? Like what? We're going to hedge against the apocalypse? His laugh had a manic edge, the sound of someone whose brain couldn't process what was happening. Is it real? I pressed my forehead against the cool refrigerator door, leaving a smudge I would normally rush to clean. Lucas, tell me this is some kind of mistake. I don't... His voice dropped to a whisper. Channel 7 showed something. A cloud. Then they cut out. People are saying Pasadena is... Static interrupted him. Just stay home, man, or get underground. I gotta call my sister. The line went dead. I turned to find Meredith on the floor, arms wrapped around Tanner, who'd started hyperventilating, short, desperate gasps that made his narrow shoulders hitch. Alexis stood paralyzed by the sink, tears cutting silent tracks through her foundation. A vice tightened around my chest as reality sank in. I didn't know what to do. For the first time in my adult life, there was no protocol, no procedure, no expert to consult. The TV sputtered back to life. To repeat, an explosion of unknown magnitude has been reported near, before dissolving into static again. I need to check the office, I blurted, hating the desperation in my voice. There's supposed to be some kind of shelter protocol. A bunker in the sublevel, I think. I was babbling, inventing security where there was none. A bunker? Meredith's eyebrows pulled together, doubt creasing her forehead. Since when does Westlake have a bunker? I forced my face into what I hoped looked like confidence rather than constipation. It'll be safer than sitting here. Trust me. But trust was the last thing I deserved. Truth was, I just wanted to run to the one place where I still felt important, where people nodded when I spoke and pretended I knew what I was doing. The high-rise where I'd spent more time than in my own home. You want us to stay behind? Meredith's question was quiet but sharp as a scalpel. No. The word shot out too quickly. No, we stick together, all of us. Relief softened her face for just a moment before fear reclaimed it. I snatched my keys from the hook, the metal biting into my palm. Alexis, grab the emergency water from the garage and whatever food you can fit in your backpack. I was improvising, falling back on half-remembered disaster prep specials. Meredith, get Tanner's meds and all the cash from the bedroom safe. And coats. It might get cold. As they scattered, I stared at the television, now showing nothing but choppy static. In its grainy surface, I caught my reflection. A middle-aged man with thinning hair and wide eyes, suddenly recognizing how thin the veneer of civilization really was. Something ancient and cold slithered up my spine. Not just fear of death, but a deeper dread. A sense that whatever waited outside would change us in ways we couldn't reverse. The drive downtown turned Wilshire Boulevard into some nightmarish funhouse version of itself. A businessman in a wrinkled Brooks Brothers suit stood frozen mid-stride on the sidewalk, his coffee splattered at his feet, phone clutched to his ear like a talisman. Outside Starbucks, a barista in her green apron knelt on the pavement, rocking back and forth, mascara tracking down her cheeks. The traffic light at La Brea flickered red-green, strobing the street in sickly pulses. A Black Hawk helicopter, not LAPD's usual blue and whites, thundered so low overhead I felt the throb in my molars, its loudspeaker cutting in and out. All residents must, immediate shelter, do not approach the... before dissolving into metallic whine. My knuckles popped as I strangled the steering wheel. "Damn it," I muttered, yanking the car right to avoid a Ford Explorer abandoned diagonally across 2 lanes, driver's door hanging open like a broken wing. Sweat trickled down my ribs, my starched shirt sticking to my back. "Jeremy, we should turn around," Meredith whispered, barely audible over Tanner's hiccuping sobs. Her fingernails dug half-moons into the leather armrest. "Look at this. It's not safe." "And what? Go back to a house with big windows and 0 supplies," I snapped, my throat tight with panic. I caught her flinch, regretted the edge in my voice. "Sorry, Mer, Travis knows people, government people. If anyone has real information on whether this is some kind of false alarm or—" I couldn't finish the sentence. The alternative dangled in the air between us, too monstrous to name. We screeched to a stop outside Westlake Tower. 53 floors of blue-tinted glass shaped like a twisted obelisk. I'd always thought it looked sleek, impressive. Now it loomed like a giant guillotine, the morning sun transforming its windows into a shattered mirror reflecting chaos below. A cluster of people huddled at the revolving doors. Emily from accounting in her pressed pantsuit still wearing her AirPods, Ramirez from the mailroom in faded jeans, Shannon from HR, her pink Lululemon workout gear surreal against the backdrop of panic. A receptionist I recognized, Diane, Denise, crouched in the portico, phone pressed to her ear, sobbing. "Mom, please answer, please, please." Over and over, snot bubbling from her nose. I twisted to face my family, heart seizing at the sight of them. "I'll run in, find out what's happening, and be right back." Meredith's face went tight, that muscle twitching in her jaw. "Jeremy Daniels." 5 minutes tops, I cut her off, tapping my watch. "I swear to God, 5 minutes to find Travis, get real information, then we figure out our next move. Together." She exhaled slowly, nostrils flaring. I stepped out into air that tasted like pennies and burnt plastic. A hot, gritty wind whipped trash around my ankles. Starbucks cups, printouts, a single woman's shoe. My wedding ring clinked against the window as I tried for a reassuring tap, Meredith's drawn face on the other side making my stomach lurch. The lobby I'd walked through 5 days a week for 12 years had transformed into some hellish parody of itself. Security guards Ramon and Tyrell, typically so professional in their crisp uniforms, shouted contradictory instructions. Everyone downstairs. Nobody move. Beth from legal huddled by the reception desk, her mascara smeared like war paint, hyperventilating into her Hermes scarf. Howard from IT pounded the elevator call button with the heel of his hand, over and over, his face blank with shock. The overhead speakers that usually piped in inoffensive jazz now crackled. "Emergency protocols activated. Proceed to designated assembly points. Emergency protocols activated. Proceed to—" The message cut out mid-sentence, replaced by a high-pitched whine. "Jeremy!" Lucas materialized from the chaos, his lanky frame pushing through the crowd. I hardly recognized him, his usually immaculate Windsor knot hanging loose, his thinning hair standing up like he'd been electrocuted. "Oh wow, you actually showed up." A manic giggle escaped him. "Travis is having a goddamn meltdown on 5. Says there's some kind of protocol, that we need to secure the Henderson files." The Henderson files. Like anybody gives a rat's ass about mortgage derivatives when the world's ending. "Lucas, focus." I grabbed his bony shoulders. "Is there a shelter here? A basement level? Something secure?" His eyes darted around like trapped insects. They're saying—" He lowered his voice to a whisper that reeked of bourbon. "I heard security talking about a sub-basement, but nobody's badge works for that level except Travis and the executives. But Hutchinson says it's just rumors that—" A wet, strangled cry split the air, cutting him off mid-sentence. 10 feet away, Tanya Nguyen, the quant genius whose algorithms had made millions for the firm, thrashed on the floor by the water cooler. Her iPhone skittered across the marble, its screen still flashing the emergency alert. Dark liquid, oh God, was that blood? trickled from her right ear, a scarlet thread disappearing into her black bob. "It's in my head," she gasped, fingernails raking furrows down her temples, leaving raw red tracks. "It's knocking, knocking, knocking." Lucas and I shoved through the gawking crowd. I dropped to my knees beside her, the cold marble seeping through my slacks. "Tanya? Tanya, can you hear me?" Her eyes rolled back, showing crescents of white. Her spine arched so severely I heard something crack. Vertebrae or ribs, I couldn't tell. She clawed at her ears, her nose, her eyes, as if trying to rip something out of her skull. Ramon, the security guard, pushed through, shouting, "Give her space!" Someone call 911. But the crowd just pressed closer, phone cameras raised like grotesque appendages. Tanya's body went rigid, then began convulsing, her Louboutin heels drumming against the floor. A sound escaped her throat. Not a scream, not a moan, but something older, more primal, like an animal caught in a trap. Then, with a final shudder, she went completely still, eyes fixed on the ceiling. A trickle of blackish fluid, thick as oil, leaked from the corner of her mouth. People fumbled with their phones, but the calls wouldn't connect. Lucas clutched my sleeve, his fingers digging into my arm, his breath coming in pants. "What the hell? What the hell? What the actual hell?" "Jesus," I whispered, my stomach cramping with nausea. Tanya's IQ had been off the charts, her mind a precision instrument that could spot patterns no one else could see. Now she lay on imported Italian marble like discarded trash, whatever brilliance she'd possessed snuffed out in seconds. And this wasn't radiation sickness. I'd seen documentaries about Chernobyl, Hiroshima. This was something else, something worse. A feedback squeal from outside made us all jump. "Evacuate immediately." The voice through the megaphone was distorted, mechanical. "The contamination is spreading. Evacuate immediately." Through the glass doors, I spotted figures in hazmat suits advancing up the street, bulky white shapes with reflective face shields that revealed nothing of the humans inside. Their movements were uncannily synchronized, like a hive mind or well-trained military unit. The sight triggered some deep-wired prey instinct in my brain, a certainty that whatever was coming for us wasn't help. I grabbed Lucas by his wrinkled lapels. "I need to get my family out of here. Come with us." His face twisted, something like shame and terror battling across his features. He shook his head, a drop of sweat flicking from his chin. "My sister's in Silver Lake with her kids. Cell towers are jammed. Travis says he can get through on the landlines, get us priority evacuation if we secure the systems." He swallowed audibly. "I can't leave without knowing if she's okay. I can't." "Lucas, for God's sake." "You go." He cut me off, something hardening in his normally easygoing face. "Take care of Meredith and your kids. I'll be fine." His false confidence didn't match the fear stink rolling off him, but I recognized the stubborn set of his jaw. He'd made up his mind, retreating into denial and routine as a shield against the unthinkable. I could almost understand it. The comfort of pretending this was just another workday crisis to be managed with spreadsheets and conference calls. "Fine," I said, squeezing his shoulder one last time, feeling the sharp bones beneath his jacket. "But if things get worse, you get the hell out, you hear me?" Yeah, he nodded, his attempt at a reassuring smile more like a grimace. "I'll see you tomorrow for that 9 a.m. with Greenblatt, right?" That was the last time I saw Lucas alive. 3 days later, I'd find what was left of him in a corner office on the 5th floor. But by then, he wasn't Lucas anymore. By then, none of us were the same people we'd been. I shoved through the crowd, bursting back outside just as a noise like twisting metal, magnified 1,000 times, shuddered through the ground. The entire building seemed to flex, glass panels warping and rippling as if caught in some invisible current. A woman behind me screamed. A man dropped to his knees, covering his head. My eyes locked on our Audi, and my heart stopped. The car was empty, doors hanging open. "Meredith!" I screamed, voice breaking. "Alexis! Tanner! For 3 eternal seconds, nothing. Then I spotted them huddled behind a concrete planter 50 feet away. Alexis's electric blue hair whipped around her pale face as she frantically waved. I sprinted over, lungs burning. What happened? Why did you leave the car? Meredith's face was ghost white except for a red mark blooming on her cheekbone. Some guy tried to take the car, she said, her voice shaking but angry. Smashed the passenger window with a tire iron, said he needed it for his family. She swallowed hard. Told us to get out or he'd drag us out. Tanner clung to Alexis's waist, his face buried against her ribs, skinny shoulders quaking with silent sobs. Rage exploded in my chest, hot, metallic, violent. I'd never considered myself a fighter, had always avoided confrontation, but in that moment, I wanted blood. Where is he? Did he hurt you? Security scared him off, Meredith said, touching the mark on her face. It's nothing. Just glass when it shattered. My eyes went to the red welt. She flinched when I reached for her. I'm fine, she insisted. What about inside? Is there a shelter? I shook my head, shame replacing rage. I'd abandoned them for nothing. It's chaos in there. We need to go home. Now. We scrambled back to our violated car, the jagged hole in the passenger window letting in a symphony of distant alarms, screams, and that strange metallic groaning that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. I turned the key, my stomach clenching as the needle hovered just below half a tank. Would it be enough? The gas stations would be mobbed. I nudged into traffic, a solid wall of bumpers, the occasional gap quickly swallowed by desperate drivers. Horns blared in a constant, useless chorus. The radio cycled through static and fragments. Unprecedented event. Hiss, advising all residents to crackle. Nuclear event. Seek shelter immediately. Daddy? Alexis's voice drifted from the back seat, stripped of its usual teenage snark, suddenly so young it made my heart crack. Are they sure it's nuclear? Like a bomb? My eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. The blue streaks in her hair, the ones that had seemed like such a rebellion last week, now looked childish, a game of dress-up. I don't know, Lexi, I admitted, the old nickname slipping out. But we're going to stick together, whatever happens. I promise. The 405 on-ramp loomed ahead, typically a nightmare at rush hour, now an apocalyptic snarl of chrome and desperation stretching to the horizon. Abandoned cars dotted the lanes, some with doors flung open as if their occupants had made a run for it. I merged into the gridlock, becoming another sardine in the slowest escape in history. Oh, for Christ's sake, I muttered, smacking the steering wheel. Stuck in the world's worst traffic jam during Armageddon. So very LA. A snort sob escaped Alexis. Way to lean into the stereotypes, Dad. Meredith's fingers found mine on the gear shift, cold and trembling but steady. We'll be okay, she whispered, the lie heavy between us. At least we're together. But her gaze kept flicking to the side mirror, to the rear view mirror, to the horizon behind us, as if expecting pursuit. My own neck prickled with the certainty of being watched. We edged forward exactly 16 feet in the next quarter hour. The radio crackled back to life, a new message cutting through the static. This is an emergency alert. The event has been reclassified as Code Black. Repeat, Code Black. Beyond nuclear. Evacuate affected zones. Warning. Psychic interference detected. Do not. The transmission dissolved into an electrical whine that made my fillings ache. Psychic what? Meredith twisted the volume knob down. What does that even mean? The answer came before I could speak. A metallic bang to our left made us all jump. A middle-aged woman in a floral blouse stumbled out of a silver Honda, her movements jerky and uncoordinated. She clutched at her temples, her mouth opened in a silent scream before finding voice. Get out! She shrieked, clawing at her scalp hard enough to draw blood. Get out of my head! She collapsed to her knees on the baking asphalt, then toppled forward, face first onto the road. She didn't try to break her fall. She didn't move again. In the back seat, Tanner whimpered, a wet animal sound of pure terror. Alexis wrapped herself around him, covering his eyes. "Dad," she hissed, "we have to move. Now." "Right." I wrenched the wheel, mounting the shoulder, tires bumping over debris, abandoned luggage, a child's teddy bear, something that might have been a shoe. I scraped past the bumpers of cars whose drivers leaned on their horns or screamed curses. The Westfield exit was half a mile ahead. If we could just reach it, get off this death trap of a highway. The dashboard lights flickered like fireflies. The engine coughed, sputtered. "No, no, no, no," I chanted, stomping the gas pedal. "Come on, you overpriced German piece of—" The car lurched forward another 20 yards, then died with a whimper. The radio cut out. The AC stopped blowing. Every electrical system went dark simultaneously. "Dad?" Alexis's voice hitched on the single syllable. "What's happening?" "Some kind of electrical failure," I said, my mind racing through possibilities. EMP from a nuclear blast, power surge. The sickening realization that we were completely vulnerable hit me like a physical blow. "We need to go on foot, now." "Are you insane?" Meredith stared at me, eyes huge. "Walk down the middle of the 405? A sound escaped my throat. Not quite a laugh, rough as sandpaper. "You see anyone giving out tickets? It's not like we're holding up traffic." We grabbed anything useful. The half case of water bottles I'd stashed in the trunk after Costco last weekend, Tanner's medication, my wallet with its now useless platinum Amex. Some bizarre autopilot made me reach for my attaché case, stuffed with prospectuses and quarterly projections that had seemed so crucial 8 hours ago. As I slammed the trunk, movement caught my eye. A gray-haired man in a Lakers jersey slumped forward against his steering wheel 2 cars away. Something dark and viscous trickled from his nostrils, pooling on the dashboard. His eyes stared at nothing, glassy and fixed. But the worst part was his mouth, slightly open, coated with what looked like black molasses. Acid surged up my throat. I swallowed hard, tasting bitter coffee. Tanner started to turn his head toward the man. I yanked him around, too rough in my panic. "Don't," I barked. "Eyes on me, buddy. Just keep walking." We picked our way through the automotive graveyard, stepping over discarded purses, suitcases, a child's backpack shaped like a dinosaur. Tanner's small hand clutched mine, clammy and trembling. "Daddy," he whispered, using a name he'd abandoned for the more grown-up dad over a year ago. "My tummy hurts real bad, and my head feels funny, like buzzing." I squeezed his fingers, trying to project a confidence I didn't remotely feel. "We'll be home soon, kiddo. Just a little bit further." But as we finally reached the exit ramp, cool doubt settled in my stomach. Was home still standing? The only certainty I had was the 3 people trudging beside me, and the growing fear that I had no idea how to keep them safe. Westwood Boulevard looked like someone had taken an axe to civilization itself. The Ralph's supermarket's front window gaped like a shattered mouth, shards of glass glinting in the afternoon sun. 2 teenage boys in private school uniforms, Marlboro or Harvard Westlake judging by the crests, hauled out armfuls of Red Bull and potato chips. The Wells Fargo across the street had its ATM ripped open, green bills fluttering in the breeze like confetti. An elderly Korean woman sat on the curb outside her looted boutique, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking. "Stick to me like glue," I growled to my family, knuckles white around my useless phone. Meredith's fingers dug into Tanner's shoulders as we skirted a city bus toppled on its side, its windows punched out like missing teeth. My Italian leather shoes, $300 at Nordstrom last month, crunched over broken glass and scattered pills from the ransacked Walgreens. My phone vibrated, a single desperate pulse in my palm. 1 bar of signal flickered in the corner, a technological death rattle. Without thinking, I dialed our home number. Maybe Mrs. Jones from next door had checked in. She had our spare key, always collected our mail when we were in Cabo. 1 ring, 2, a click. "Hello?" I said, breath catching. Jeremy? Is that you? The voice was unmistakably Meredith's, that slight Georgia lilt she never quite shook, but layered with a tinny echo and something else. Something wrong. My heart stuttered. I gaped at my wife, flesh and blood, 5 feet away, then back at the phone. Who the fuck is this? Who's in our house? The line crackled like bacon hitting a hot pan. A low moan, barely audible. Then dead air. Jeremy? Meredith's actual voice jolted me. Her face was drained of color, freckles standing out like copper pennies. Who was that? I swallowed hard enough that my throat clicked. It sounded exactly like you. Your voice. But with this echo. Someone broke in? Alexis's voice climbed an octave, cracking on the last syllable. Her mascara had smudged beneath her eyes, giving her a raccoon-like appearance that emphasized her youth. Bad signal, I lied, shoving the phone into my pocket. Crossed wires or something. Come on. We pushed forward, passing the pet store where Tanner had picked out his goldfish, now with its tropical fish tanks shattered, puddles of water mixing with what looked horribly like blood on the linoleum. At the intersection of Ashton and Westholme, 5 men materialized from behind a landscaping truck. The youngest couldn't have been more than 20, a gangly kid with neck tattoos and a Dodgers cap, while the oldest had the leathery skin and hollow eyes of someone who'd been living rough long before today's apocalypse. The tallest hefted an aluminum baseball bat, its barrel already dented and smeared with something dark. Stop right there, the leader barked, a scrawny white guy with a patchy beard and pupils so dilated his eyes looked black. His UCLA hoodie was stained with fresh sweat patches. You got water? Food? His voice had the desperate rasp of someone who'd been screaming or crying. Meredith pulled Tanner behind her, positioning herself between our son and these men. Alexis froze, her breathing shallow and fast like a cornered rabbit's. My mind raced through options. We couldn't outrun them, not with Tanner. I couldn't fight 5 men. Then my fingers brushed the cool metal of my watch. I unclasped the Rolex Submariner, my reward for the Henderson portfolio that netted the firm $12 million last year, and held it out, the platinum gleaming obscenely in the afternoon light. Take it, I said, keeping my voice steady. Platinum case, sapphire crystal. Worth $8,000 at Tourneau. More if you find the right pawn shop. The leader snatched it, turning it over with dirt-rimmed fingernails. The second hand swept smoothly across its face, counting down seconds in a world where time suddenly felt meaningless. His thumb smudged my fingerprints from the polished surface. This real? He asked, eyeing me suspiciously. His right hand twitched toward his waistband, where the outline of something, knife? Gun, bulged beneath his sweatshirt. Check the weight, I said. Feel how heavy it is. That's solid platinum, Swiss movement. He tested it in his palm, then nodded to his companions. Let him go, but don't come back this way. His voice softened for a moment. Get your kids somewhere safe, man. It's getting worse by the hour. The irony wasn't lost on me. The status symbol I'd obsessed over, saved for, finally paying dividends in the most unexpected way. As we hurried past, Tanner's small hand clammy in mine, I wondered how many other useless totems of wealth might save us before this was over. We cut through the alley behind Whole Foods, past the dumpsters where I'd once seen a Food Network celebrity arguing with his wife. The cloying stench of rotting produce made my empty stomach churn. Above us, a military helicopter circled, its loudspeaker broadcasting a message that distorted into unintelligible fragments. All citizens are summoned by the resist and witness the horrors beyond death. What does that mean? Alexis whispered, her voice barely audible over the chopper's rotors. What are we being summoned to? Probably an evacuation point, I lied, the words tasting sour. Something in that metallic voice, in that phrasing, triggered a primal flight response in my hindbrain. Whatever was summoning us wasn't offering salvation. After what felt like miles of suburban labyrinth, we turned onto Hillgard Avenue, our street, The cul-de-sac where we'd barbecued with neighbors last 4th of July, where Tanner had learned to ride his bike, where I'd drunkenly kissed Meredith under mistletoe hung from the lamppost last Christmas. Now it sat abandoned, every house buttoned up tight. The Richardsons' American flag hung limp on its pole. Our Tudor-style house, the executive family home the realtor had gushed over, with its $1.8 million mortgage and property taxes that made me wince quarterly, looked untouched. The brass knocker gleamed on the glossy black door. The boxwoods I paid Manuel to trim monthly stood in perfect symmetry. The cobblestone path was swept clean, but something was off. Like walking into a perfect replica of a familiar room where all the furniture has been shifted 2 inches to the left. "Stay behind me," I murmured, sliding my key into the lock. The tumblers clicked with their usual precision. I pushed the door open, the familiar creak of the hinge suddenly sinister. "Hello?" My voice sounded foreign in my own ears. "Anyone here?" "Cover your mouths and noses," I instructed, though I knew it was theater. If radiation had reached us, bandanas wouldn't help. But Tanner's eyes were so wide with fear that I needed to give him something, anything that felt like protection. Meredith locked and chained the door behind us, her hands methodically checking each window latch. "Circuit breakers in the basement. Should I check it?" "Not yet," I said, sweeping my phone's flashlight across the room. The beam caught dust motes swirling in patterns that seemed almost deliberate. "Let's make sure everything's secure first." The furniture sat exactly where it should. The $9,000 West Elm sectional, the Eames lounge chair I'd splurged on for my 40th, the Noguchi coffee table that Meredith had fretted would be dangerous once Tanner was born. Yet somehow, they all looked like props on a stage, as if they'd never been sat on or used. Tanner dropped onto the couch, burying his face in the throw pillow Meredith's mother had needle-pointed with our family name. Alexis stood motionless before the dark TV screen, her reflection a ghostly outline in the black glass. "What happened at your office?" Meredith asked quietly, her arms wrapped around herself, knuckles white against her elbows. The bruise on her cheekbone from the carjacking attempt had deepened to a plum color. I told her everything: Tanya's seizure, the black fluid, Lucas's refusal to leave. My voice sounded hollow in the unnaturally still air. "It's like everyone's losing their minds at once," I finished lamely. The silence that followed felt suffocating. I looked around our curated showpiece of a home, the original Rothko print I'd dropped $35,000 on at a charity auction, the hand-knotted Persian rug that Meredith had insisted completed the room, the Viking range we used maybe twice a month when we weren't ordering Postmates. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, bitter as burnt coffee. "What is it?" Meredith asked, her eyebrows drawing together. "All this," I gestured at our surroundings. The McMansion, the fancy zip code, the private school tuitions. I really thought it made us safe. My voice cracked embarrassingly. I thought if we just had enough money, enough status, enough stuff, nothing bad could touch us. Meredith's lips quirked in that sad half-smile I'd fallen in love with in college when we were broke and happy in a one-bedroom walk-up. Better to figure that out now than never, I guess. She squeezed my hand, her wedding ring, 2 carats, cushion cut from Tiffany, digging into my palm. Alexis had found my emergency radio, the one I'd bought during that tsunami scare and then promptly stashed in a drawer. She cranked the handle, generating enough power to make the receiver crackle to life. She spun the dial through bursts of static, fragments of panicked voices, and eerie silence, until finally a man's voice cut through. "Repeat. The impact zone appears to be concentrated northwest of the city, near Chatsworth. This is not, we repeat, not a conventional explosive device. Reports coming in describe mass hallucinations, electrical anomalies, and unexplained phenomena consistent with..." The voice dropped to a whisper, as if checking who might be listening. "Some kind of psychic incident. Witnesses report seeing and hearing things that aren't physically present. The National Guard has established a quarantine zone and urges all citizens to remain The transmission dissolved into a shriek of feedback that made us all flinch, then dead air. Psychic? Meredith echoed, her forehead creased with confusion. Like, mind reading? Before I could answer, Tanner's small voice piped up from the couch. The whispers are getting louder. I turned to face him. What whispers, buddy? He sat up, his dinosaur t-shirt rumpled, dark circles under his 8-year-old eyes. His lower lip trembled. Under my bed. They've been there for 3 days, talking in a funny language, like when we went to that Chinese restaurant, but scarier. Meredith moved toward him. Honey, you're just tired and scared. It's probably the pipes, or... He told me before we left. Alexis cut in, her voice sharp as broken glass. This morning, when you were both too busy pretending everything was normal. He said there were voices under his bed saying weird stuff. I thought it was just him being anxious about his math test, but she looked at Tanner with something like fear. The guilt hit me like a physical blow. How many times had I brushed off Tanner's imagination because I was too wrapped up in quarterly reports and client calls? Show me, I said, kneeling in front of him. Can you show me where you hear them? He nodded solemnly, sliding his small hand into mine. His palm was clammy, his fingers ice cold despite the warm September air. We walked down the hallway where Meredith had hung professional photos of our family through the years. Alexis losing her first tooth, Tanner's preschool graduation, our vacation to Maui last winter. The smiling faces looked like strangers now. Tanner's bedroom door stood slightly ajar, exactly as he'd left it that morning in our rush to leave. Keep out sign hanging crooked, Star Wars decals peeling at the corners. Inside, his room was a museum to childhood. NASA poster above the bed, Lego Death Star half completed on his desk, solar system bedspread rumpled from his hasty exit. But something felt wrong. I dropped to my knees, shining my phone flashlight under the twin bed. At first I saw only the usual evidence of an 8-year-old boy's housekeeping. A forgotten sock, a dog-eared Captain Underpants book, dust bunnies that indicated our housekeeper's thoroughness. Then my beam caught something on the baseboard, a viscous black substance that reminded me horribly of the fluid that had leaked from Tanya's mouth. It clung to the white paint in irregular patches, glistening wetly in the flashlight beam. But what made my heart stutter wasn't its appearance. It was its movement. The stuff pulsed rhythmically, like a cluster of tiny hearts beating in unison. As I watched, frozen, a thin tendril extended outward, probing blindly along the floorboard. What is that? Alexis whispered from the doorway, leaning forward despite herself. I thrust an arm out, blocking her approach. Don't get close to it. Don't touch it. A sound emanated from the substance, not heard with my ears but felt in my molars, in my sinuses, in the fluid of my inner ears. A vibration that formed not words but concepts, alien and intrusive. Hunger, expansion, convergence. My bladder threatened to release. Some primitive part of my brain recognized what my conscious mind couldn't articulate. This thing, whatever it was, didn't belong in our reality. It was wrong on a fundamental level, like finding an iPhone in a Renaissance painting. We need to seal this room, I said, my voice sounding strained and thin. Now. We can't stay if this contamination is spreading. Before anyone could move, the house shuddered violently. Not the familiar rolling motion of a California earthquake, but a targeted impact, as if something massive had struck the foundation itself. The antique Tiffany lamp Meredith's grandmother had left her toppled from the hallway table, shattering into a kaleidoscope of colored glass. The lights flickered once, twice, then died with an electric sigh. Aftershock? Meredith suggested, but her tone said she didn't believe it either. This wasn't geological. This was intentional. Like something had sensed us observing it and lashed out in response. We can't stay here, I said, backing out of Tanner's room and pulling the door firmly shut. We need to find one of those emergency shelters. Meredith's face crumpled with exhaustion and fear. Where, Jeremy? You saw what's happening out there. People are losing their minds. That man would have hurt us for water bottles. The rec center at Holmby Park, Alexis said, her thumbs flying over her now useless phone out of habit. They were converting it to a shelter. I saw it on Twitter before everything went down, but she bit her lip. They said space was limited. First come, first served. I ran my fingers through my hair, grimacing at the gritty feel of it. When had I last showered? This morning. A lifetime ago. We'll try anyway. First light tomorrow, we head there. If it's full, we'll try UCLA. The university must have protocols, underground facilities. As we retreated to the living room, the image of that pulsing black substance burned in my mind. The way it moved with purpose. The alien consciousness I'd sensed behind its movement. The feeling of being observed by something utterly inhuman. We settled in for the night, a mockery of our usual evening routine. Instead of Netflix and iPads, we had flickering candles and shadows that seemed to move when you weren't looking directly at them. Instead of Meredith's homemade sangria or my bourbon, we rationed sips from lukewarm water bottles. Instead of our separate bedrooms, we huddled together on the sectional, no one willing to be alone. Outside, Los Angeles had gone silent in a way I'd never experienced. No distant freeway hum, no helicopters, no music from the college kids next door. It felt like the city was holding its breath, waiting. From down the hall, from behind Tanner's closed door, came a rhythmic sound. Not quite a click, not quite a tap, more organic, like fingernails drumming on hardwood, or like something wet and viscous expanding and contracting, growing. Nobody mentioned it. Nobody slept. We waited for dawn, 4 humans huddled together against something we couldn't name or fight, something that might already be inside our walls. I jolted awake to the sound of glass shattering, not the subtle crack of a water glass, but the violent explosion of a window giving way. Beside me on our absurdly expensive sectional, Meredith's eyes snapped open, that vertical worry line between her brows deepening instantly. Alexis uncurled from her fetal position, mascara smudged across her cheekbones like war paint. Tanner, wedged against my side, whimpered in his half-sleep, one hand reflexively clutching my shirt. Another crash outside, the unmistakable sound of metal crunching against metal, followed by a man's voice yelling something unintelligible that ended in a gurgling choke. Then nothing but that unnatural silence that made my scalp prickle. "We need to move," I whispered, my voice a rasping croak. I swallowed, but my saliva glands refused to cooperate. Whatever that black shit is, it's spreading. We need to find somewhere. Anywhere else. I untangled myself from Tanner's grip and limped to the window, right leg numb with pins and needles from sleeping in a twisted position. Pulling back the edge of the curtain with my pinky finger, some childish part of me afraid to touch too much fabric, I peered out onto Hillgard Avenue. Bob Kellerman from 4 Doors Down, the retired dermatologist who'd bragged about his Tesla's autopilot at last year's block party, stood in the middle of the street in what looked like pajama bottoms and a USC alumni sweatshirt. But something was horribly wrong with the way he moved, his limbs jerking like a marionette with tangled strings. Dried blood had crusted around his ears and nostrils, flaking off in rusty scabs. 20 feet away, Lisa Chen, whose twins went to school with Tanner, shuffled in small circles, gripping her grandmother's antique cast-iron skillet like she was about to serve the most demented breakfast in history. Her eyes, usually sharp and intelligent, looked flat as a doll's. Neither acknowledged the other's presence. They just drifted, drawn by some invisible current I couldn't see. Tanner appeared at my elbow, his Spider-Man pajamas rumpled and sweat-stained. His lower lip quivered. "Dad, that's Miss Chen. She gave me extra fortune cookies last time we got takeout." My stomach clenched. "I know, buddy. What's wrong with her face? Why are her eyes like that?" I kneeled down, my knees popping like bubble wrap, bringing myself to his eye level. His breath smelled of sleep and fear, that sour milk scent unique to frightened children. I don't know exactly, but I do know we can't stay here anymore. That stuff under your bed. I trailed off, not wanting to scare him worse, but needing him to understand the urgency. I think it's dangerous, and it's growing. Is it alive? His voice cracked on the last word. I don't know. The terror in his eyes made me want to lie, to construct some comforting fiction, but we were beyond that now. But we'll figure it out together, okay? Meredith handed him the mini maglite I'd stashed in our earthquake kit years ago. The battery's probably half dead by now. Her face was ghost pale except for purple-blue shadows beneath her eyes, her dirty blonde hair hanging in greasy strands. She caught my gaze, her bloodshot eyes asking 1,000 silent questions. Where are we actually going, Jeremy? You have a real destination, or are we just running blind? I hesitated. The fact was, I had no damn clue. Every instinct screamed to get away from that thing growing under Tanner's bed. But beyond that, I was as lost as they were. The evacuation center at Pauley Pavilion, I improvised, naming the UCLA basketball arena a mile west. University has to have protocols, underground facilities, maybe even working communications. Alexis snorted softly, not quite rolling her eyes, but close. Even now, even here, the teenage skepticism remained. I almost found it comforting. We worked methodically through the kitchen, shoving protein bars, dried fruit, and bottled water into our day packs. I strapped my hunting knife to my belt, the one I'd bought for a Tahoe camping trip 5 years ago and had used exactly once to whittle a marshmallow stick. Meredith dug out our first aid kit and divided the supplies between bags. Alexis filled an empty spray bottle with hand sanitizer. As the gray dawn strengthened to a sickly yellow, we slipped out the front door, pausing on the porch to scan for threats. Every sense heightened to painful acuity. I guided my family down our herringbone brick walkway, past Meredith's wilting hydrangeas, and onto the driveway. Whatever was animating Bob and Lisa had moved them elsewhere. The street stood empty now, littered with debris that hadn't been there yesterday. A child's red tricycle lay overturned by a storm drain. A FedEx package torn open, its contents scattered. A single woman's shoe, one of those red-soled Louboutins Meredith coveted, lying in a puddle of something dark that might have been oil. Might have been. Stay low and quiet, I murmured. We'll cut through the alley behind the Pattersons' place. The alley where our gardener Manuel parked his truck on Wednesdays, where Alexis had learned to ride her bike, where neighborhood cats congregated to yowl their midnight symphonies, now felt like a foreign country. The morning sun, filtering through a yellowish haze, cast everything in a jaundiced light. Halfway down the alley, near the rusted chain-link fence that marked the border of old Mrs. Jones's property, a figure shuffled toward us. My heart seized momentarily before I recognized Harold Collins, 82 years old, widowed last spring, former high school physics teacher who walked his Yorkie, Pepper, at precisely 7:15 every morning. I'd helped him clear his rain gutters last November, but this wasn't the sharp-minded, if frail, old man who'd recited pi to 50 decimal places to impress Tanner. This Harold moved wrong, his neck cocked at an angle that looked painful, vertebrae protruding beneath papery skin. His eyes, cataracts beginning to cloud the edges last I'd noticed, now stared vacantly over our shoulders. Kial, Sumat, Velkoras, he mumbled, the syllables slippery and strange, nothing like the precise elocution he'd been known for. A thin trickle of blackish fluid seeped from his left ear, tracking a line down his jaw. Alexis's nails dug into my bicep. "Dad," she whispered, barely a breath. Harold's head snapped sideways with a sickening crack, not turning to look at us but tilting severely, the movement unnatural. Then, with the jerky motion of a wind-up toy, he pivoted and shuffled away, orthopedic shoes scraping concrete. What language was that? Alexis finally managed, her voice constricted with horror. "No idea," I replied, my own voice sounding distant in my ears. "Nothing I've ever heard." The words had felt wrong in my ears, like they were bypassing my auditory nerves and scraping directly against my cerebral cortex. "Let's move," Meredith urged, one arm wrapped protectively around Tanner. "Now." We cut through the back parking lot of the strip mall on Wilshire, where we'd ordered Thai takeout every Friday. Now the service entrance gaped open, security gate twisted as if pried by something impossibly strong. We ducked inside, taking the back stairs to the lower-level parking garage. Meredith's phone, miraculously still clinging to a bar of reception, vibrated in her palm. A new emergency alert scrolled across the cracked screen. "This is not a nuclear event. Unknown entity infiltration in progress. Cognitive disruption confirmed. Do not trust your own thoughts. Do not trust your own thoughts." I looked at my family through a haze of exhaustion and fear. If something could corrupt our perceptions, our very cognition, how could we navigate this nightmare? How could we know what was real and what was implanted? The idea that my own mind might betray me was more terrifying than any physical threat. We picked our way through abandoned cars, a Mercedes with its door hanging open, a Prius with a child's car seat visible in the back, a delivery van tipped on its side. Halfway across the garage level, a fluttering fluorescent light revealed a figure huddled against a support column. I thrust out an arm, stopping my family in their tracks. The man turned at the sound of our approach. Mid-30s, unshaven, wearing what had once been a crisp button-down but was now sweat-stained and torn at the collar. His eyes held the feral gleam of an animal pushed beyond fear into something worse. In his right hand, he gripped a tire iron, knuckles blanched white with tension. "Back the fuck off," he snarled, spittle flying from cracked lips. "This spot's mine. Mine." I raised my palms slowly, making myself as non-threatening as possible. "We're just passing through," I said, keeping my voice even. "No trouble. Just trying to get our kids somewhere safe." From behind a concrete pillar, a woman's voice called out, ragged with panic. "Marcus? Who is it? You said nobody would find us here." She sounded young, her words slurring slightly as if drugged or concussed. "Nobody's finding anybody," I assured them, already backing away. "We're gone. You never saw us." The man, Marcus, tracked our retreat with manic eyes, tire iron raised. His pupils were blown wide, the whites webbed with red capillaries. Fight or flight had tipped decisively toward fight for this guy, and I had no intention of pushing him over that edge. We found a service stairwell at the far end, the metal door squealing on corroded hinges as I eased it open. The enclosed space smelled of urine and something worse, the copper-penny reek of old blood. At the third-floor landing, as I reached for the door handle, a voice drifted from the shadows of the descending stairwell. "Tanner, come here." I froze, hand still outstretched. That paralytic fear that turns your muscles to concrete seized me. The voice, Christ, the voice was mine. Exactly mine, down to the slight nasality I'd always been self-conscious about. "Tanner, I'm your dad," the voice continued, echoing strangely in the stairwell. "Come to me. I need your help." I spun around, playing my flashlight beam into the darkness below. Nothing but grimy concrete steps descending into shadow. Yet the voice seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Tanner's fingers slipped from mine as he took a hesitant step toward the darkness. His face, normally so expressive, had gone slack, his eyes fixed on something I couldn't see. "Dad?" he whispered, his voice small and confused. "But you're right here." I snapped from my paralysis, grabbing Tanner's shoulders and yanking him back. "Don't listen," I hissed, my heart hammering so hard I could feel it in my eyeballs. "That's not me. I'm right here." I positioned myself between my son and the darkness, though what I could physically do against a voice I had no idea. Meredith clutched Tanner to her chest, her eyes huge with terror. Alexis had a hand clamped over her mouth, teeth sunk into her knuckles hard enough to break skin. The voice, my voice, oozed from the shadows again. "I'm hurt, Tanner. I need you. Just come down the stairs a little way." just a little way. It sounded like a perfect recording of me, yet underneath was something off, like music played at the wrong speed, or a photograph with a single detail askew, something using my vocal patterns without understanding the emotional context behind them. "It's not Daddy," Meredith whispered into Tanner's hair, her voice vibrating with forced calm. "Daddy's right here with us. That's something else." A strange sound floated up from below, a high, tittering giggle that morphed into a wet, gurgling noise, like someone choking on liquid. Then footsteps echoing on metal, receding downward. "What the hell was that?" Alexis finally whispered, blood beading on her knuckle where she'd bitten through. I shook my head, unable to form coherent thoughts past the primal alarm bells clanging in my brain. There was no frame of reference for this, no cognitive slot to place it in. "We need to get out of here," I finally managed. "Now." We burst through the service door onto the street level, gulping the outside air despite its chemical taint. Wilshire Boulevard stretched before us, normally clogged with BMWs and Teslas at this hour, now a dystopian wasteland of abandoned vehicles and scattered debris. I oriented myself by the Bank of America Tower, its glass face reflecting the sickly yellow sky. "We need to find an open route west," I said, more to hear my own voice, my real voice, than to inform my family. "Maybe Sunset or Olympic, something that hasn't been blockaded yet." We trudged west, sticking to side streets, avoiding the worst of the debris. At the intersection of Wilshire and Veteran, we stumbled upon something that stopped us cold, a military checkpoint. Real military, not LAPD in tactical gear playing soldier, but actual Army or National Guard in full hazmat suits, M4 carbines at the ready. Metal barricades and razor wire formed a perimeter around what had been the federal building. Behind the barricades, canvas tents and communications equipment suggested a command center of some kind. A desperate crowd had formed at the checkpoint, maybe 50 people shoving against the barricades. A mother with twin toddlers, an elderly couple clutching each other, a man in bloody scrubs, teenagers, business people. The whole spectrum of LA's west side condensed into a knot of raw need. "We have kids," I shouted, pushing toward the front. "Please let us through." A soldier stepped forward, his face invisible behind his respirator and face shield. "No one passes," he barked, voice muffled and mechanical through the mask. "Direct orders. This area is now under quarantine. Return to your homes." "Our home isn't safe," I yelled, frustration boiling over. They're changing. Something's happening to them." Desperation made my voice crack. I said, "Turn back." The soldier's gloved finger moved from the trigger guard to the trigger itself, a subtle but unmistakable shift. Now. Around us the crowd's anguish mounted. A man with tear-streaked cheeks shoved forward, his pregnant wife behind him. "They let Dr. Patel through an hour ago," he shouted. "I saw them. Why her and not us?" "Medical personnel only," another soldier responded flatly. "Bullshit." The man lunged at the barricade, fingers catching in the chain link. "My wife's about to pop. She needs medical attention." The nearest soldier responded instantly, driving the butt of his rifle into the man's sternum with practiced efficiency. He crumpled to the pavement, gasping like a landed fish. His wife screamed, dropping to her knees beside him. "Last warning," the first soldier announced, his rifle barrel sweeping the crowd. "Clear the area or we will open fire. This is a restricted zone." "Why?" A trembling voice from somewhere in the crowd. "What are you containing?" "The infection." The word hung in the air, pregnant with implications. "Now move." Beside me, Meredith whispered, "Infection?" I thought of the black residue under Tanner's bed, pulsing like something alive. The garbled alien language from Harold Collins's mouth. The voice in the stairwell that had stolen my identity. "Whatever's changing people," I muttered. "They think it's contagious. Spreading." An unnatural hush fell over the crowd as a low, rumbling sound emanated from behind the barricades. Not the mechanical growl of a generator or vehicle. This was organic, vibrating at a frequency that made my molars ache. The soldiers tensed, several turning to look over their shoulders. "The hell is that?" someone in the crowd whispered. The rumble crescendoed into a roar, a sound no human throat could produce, multi-layered and disharmonic, like a dozen metal sheets being torn simultaneously. The soldier who'd been addressing us suddenly staggered, his rifle clattering to the pavement. His gloved hands flew to his helmet, clawing at it as if something inside was attacking him. "It's in my head," he shrieked, voice distorting through the respirator. "Get it out! Get it out!" Gunfire erupted from inside the compound, not the controlled bursts of trained soldiers, but wild, panicked sprays. Screams followed, some cutting off with sickening abruptness. The crowd scattered like startled birds, people shoving and trampling each other in their desperation to escape. I locked eyes with Meredith for a split second, a wordless transmission of pure animal fear, before grabbing Tanner with one hand and Alexis with the other. "Run!" Through the chaos, I glimpsed something emerging from one of the tents, a massive figure in a hazmat suit, but wrong somehow. It moved with stuttering, insect-like motions, its proportions grotesquely elongated. Where a human's head should be, the helmet bulged and pulsed as if containing something far larger than a human skull. Black fluid seeped from tears in the suit, not dripping but flowing upward against gravity. The thing let loose another of those multi-tonal roars and lurched toward the other soldiers, who opened fire immediately. Bullets tore through the suit, releasing not blood but gouts of that same black substance, which hung in the air like oil in water before coalescing into tendrils that reached toward the closest humans. "Move!" I screamed at my family, shoving them toward a narrow side street. We sprinted blindly, lungs burning, muscles screaming. Behind us, gunfire and inhuman shrieks followed like the soundtrack to a collapsing world. We didn't stop, couldn't stop, until we reached a rise that gave us a view over the western expanse of the city. There, on the horizon, lay the source of all this madness. A massive crater, perhaps a mile across, its edges still smoking. From its center rose a column of roiling darkness, not smoke but something more substantive, like India ink poured into clear water. Pulses of sickly purple light throbbed from within, beating with the rhythm of a massive alien heart. "Christ," Meredith breathed, the first blasphemy I'd heard from her in our 15 years of marriage. Is that ground zero?" Alexis nodded mutely, her face ashen beneath smeared makeup. Tanner pressed against my side, trembling like he had the time he'd caught flu that sent his temperature to 104. "I feel funny," he whispered, eyes fixed on the distant crater. Like something's pulling on me. In my head." We stood frozen, all four of us, as the distant crater pulsed with hungry light. Then a voice, not audible but somehow inside my skull, whispered with terrible intimacy, "Come closer, Jeremy Daniels. We have been waiting. We have always been waiting." I flinched so violently I nearly fell. The others jerked too, Alexis releasing a small, strangled cry, Meredith's hand flying to her temple as if struck. "You heard it too?" I asked, already knowing the answer. Meredith nodded, her throat working convulsively. It knew my name," she whispered. "How could it know my name?" In that moment, facing the hypnotic pull of that distant wound in the earth, I understood with bone-deep certainty. This was no nuclear event, no conventional weapon. Whatever had torn open the fabric of our reality was something ancient and patient, something that had perhaps been waiting for millennia for just this opportunity, something that hungered in ways we couldn't comprehend. And it was spreading. We ducked into a narrow side street, the echo of gunfire fading behind us. My lungs burned, each breath scraping my throat raw. Halfway down the block, wedged between a boarded-up bodega and a 1920s apartment building, stood St. Ignatius, one of those Depression-era Catholic churches built from mismatched granite blocks, its limestone facade blackened by decades of smog. A faded blue spire pointed accusingly at the diseased sky. Someone had taped a hand-lettered cardboard sign to the massive oak doors. "Refuge here, all welcome," in wobbly red Sharpie. "Could be a trap," Meredith whispered, her voice hoarse. She tightened her grip on Tanner's shoulder, pressing him against her hip. "Remember that news story last year? Those cultists in Oregon?" "Or it could be actual shelter," I countered, my parched tongue sticking to the roof of my mouth. "We can't keep going like this. We need water, rest, something." A bat-wing door creaked inward before I could touch it. My fingers instinctively curled into a fist, ready to strike. But instead of some lunatic, I found myself staring at a priest so gaunt, his clerical collar hung loose around his throat. Gray stubble peppered his hollow cheeks, and burst capillaries mapped his nose in crimson. His bloodshot eyes held the 1,000-yard stare of a man who'd seen too much to process. "Come in quickly," he whispered, glancing nervously over our shoulders. "Please, quietly. Some are praying." The temperature dropped 10 degrees as we crossed the threshold. The air inside tasted of beeswax, incense, and human fear sweat. Dozens of votive candles flickered in red glass holders, bathing the nave in a hellish glow that made the stations of the cross along the walls look like animated torture scenes. In the pews, perhaps 15 people huddled in small clusters. An elderly Asian couple clutching each other, a UPS driver still in his brown uniform, a mother cradling an infant wrapped in what looked like a tablecloth. "I'm Father Rodney," the priest said, his Adam's apple bobbing as he swallowed with visible effort. A faint Irish lilt colored his whispered words. His thin fingers trembled as he gestured toward an empty pew near the altar. A crucifix hung above it, Christ's agonized face lost in shadow. "Please, sit. Rest yourselves." A pipe organ loomed against the back wall, its brass tubes reflecting candlelight like the barrels of giant guns. The stained glass, scenes of martyrdom and resurrection, had been haphazardly reinforced with duct tape in crisscross patterns. "We've had people trickling in since dawn," Father Rodney continued, dabbing his upper lip with a handkerchief that looked like it had been used too many times. Up close, I noticed a strange glassiness to his eyes, as though he were running a fever. "I've tried to offer what comfort I can, but..." He trailed off, gaze drifting to the ornate tabernacle behind the altar. What can one say when the world breaks? Tanner's breathing came in wheezy gasps, the familiar pattern that preceded his worst panic attacks. His pupils had swallowed his irises, leaving only a thin ring of brown around pools of black. Alexis slid her water bottle toward him. "Small sips, T," she murmured, her voice gentler than I'd heard it in months. "Remember what Dr. Levine showed you? In through the nose, out through the mouth." I squeezed her shoulder, a surge of pride momentarily breaking through my exhaustion. When had my eye-rolling teenager become this competent young woman? The pews around us held a catalog of terror. An elderly woman with a silver pixie cut rocked back and forth, rosary beads clicking between arthritic knuckles as she whispered Hail Marys in ragged Spanish. A businessman in a filthy Brooks Brothers suit gnawed his thumbnail down to the quick, blood purling at the edge. His Rolex glinted as he jerked at each sound, eyes darting rat-like between exits. Near the confessional, a teenage couple clung to each other. Father Rodney shuffled to the altar steps. Then suddenly, he raised his thin arms, the sleeves of his cassock sliding back to reveal wrists no thicker than Tanner's. "My children," he began, voice wavering like a poorly tuned radio station. "We gather in the hope of salvation. Our city lies in ruins, but we must have faith. We must remain calm, share what little we have." He fumbled with a leather-bound Bible, his fingers leaving sweat marks on the gilt-edged pages. Despite everything, despite the horrors we'd witnessed, I felt a small measure of comfort as he began reciting the 23rd Psalm, the familiar cadence washing over me like an echo of Sunday school lessons 3 decades past. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures." Father Rodney's voice strengthened with the ancient words, as if drawing power from them. But halfway through he stopped abruptly, one finger frozen on the page. His breath caught audibly. The valley of the shadow of... His face contorted with effort, mouth working silently. The valley. A woman in a nurse's scrubs stood from the front pew. "Father, you okay?" Her accent was pure South Boston, incongruous in this California nightmare. Father Rodney's eyes rolled upward until only the whites showed, web-like black veins suddenly visible beneath the pale skin of his eyelids. His lips parted, and a viscous stream of tar-like fluid oozed past them, trickling down his chin in a glistening rivulet. "Oh God, not again," Meredith whispered, her blasphemy showing how far we'd fallen from normal. The Bible hit the marble with a meaty thud. Father Rodney collapsed to his knees, spine arching backward at an impossible angle, as if invisible hands were trying to fold him in half the wrong way. More of that black fluid, the same substance we'd seen under Tanner's bed, in the transformed soldier's visor, poured from his nostrils in twin streams, splashing wetly onto the communion rail. "Get out," he gurgled, his voice overlaid with something else, a deeper register vibrating beneath his words like a cello string plucked beneath a violin. "It comes..." Pandemonium erupted. A man overturned a pew trying to flee. The South Boston nurse stumbled backward, her orthopedic clogs catching on the kneeler, sending her sprawling. The elderly woman with the rosary began keening a single sustained note that raised the hair on my arms. Tanner buried his face against my chest, his small body racked with sobs. Alexis went ghostly pale, her freckles standing out like copper pennies on white paper. I grabbed them both, backing toward the rear exit. The priest convulsed on the altar steps, limbs jerking in a grotesque marionette dance. Black fluid pulsed from every orifice now, ears, eyes, even seeping through the pores of his skin like sweat. The fluid didn't obey gravity, forming globules that hovered momentarily before coalescing into tendril-like shapes. We'd nearly reached the exit when bony fingers clamped around my bicep with shocking strength. I whirled to find myself face to face with a rail-thin man in his 50s, his wild gray hair standing out from his head as if electrified. Broken blood vessels mapped his rheumy eyes, and nicotine stained the 3 fingers gripping my arm. "I touched it," he hissed, his breath hot against my face, reeking of cigarettes and something worse, a sweet putrid stench like rotting fruit. "Touched the crater with my bare hands." He thrust his palms toward me. The skin was blackened and peeling, as if he'd pressed them against a hot stove, burned like holy fire. Now I see it when I close my eyes. The city that waits beneath, the angles that shouldn't exist, the mouths, so many mouths. I tried to extricate myself without hurting him. "Take it easy, buddy. Did you actually see what caused all this?" A laugh bubbled up from his chest, the high-pitched giggle of a child, utterly incongruous coming from his weathered face. "Not nuclear, not a bomb. It's a door." His pupils contracted to pinpoints, then dilated fully, pulsing like the aperture of a camera. They've been waiting so long, so patient. Knocking, knocking, knocking. Now the door is open and they're coming through. Meredith yanked at my sleeve. "Jeremy, we need to go. Now." Her voice tight with barely controlled panic. The man's fingers dug deeper, yellowed nails breaking my skin. "The signals are already in your head," he insisted, spittle flying from cracked lips. "Once you hear them, they hear you back. Once you see them, they've seen you. Once your mind opens, it can't ever close again." His voice rose to a reedy shriek. "Let them in." He lunged at my throat with startling speed. I twisted sideways, pushing Tanner behind me as the man's momentum carried him into a wooden pew. The impact cracked the old oak, and he crumpled momentarily. Alexis shoved open the side door, a small red exit sign flickering weakly above it, and we tumbled through into a narrow service alley. The stench hit me like a physical blow, cloying rot and damp decay from the dumpster behind the Korean restaurant next door, mingled with sewage from an overflowing storm drain. Tanner doubled over, his breath coming in sharp, ragged gasps. His face had taken on a bluish tinge, lips pulled back in a grimace as he struggled for oxygen. Classic signs of a severe panic attack, but this one was worse than I'd ever seen. Meredith dropped to her knees beside him, ignoring the filthy pavement. "Tanner, honey, look at me. Look right here." She tapped her sternum. "Breathe with me, okay? In, 1, 2, 3. Out, 1, 2, 3. Her voice remained steady despite the terror I saw behind her eyes. "My pills," he gasped between heaves. "Can't breathe." "I know, baby. We're going to get more." Meredith smoothed his hair back from his sweaty forehead. "Remember what Dr. Levine said? Your brain is lying to you. You're getting enough air. Your body just thinks it isn't." Alexis leaned against the brick wall, her shoulders hunched. "Dad," she said, her voice cracking. "Father Rodney. That stuff coming out of him. Like that soldier at the barricade. And that thing under Tanner's bed. What's happening to everyone?" "I don't know exactly," I admitted, the words ashy in my mouth. "But I think we need to get as far away from that crater as possible. It's spreading, changing people somehow." Tanner's breathing was growing more labored, his chest heaving like a landed fish. The inhaler was empty. We'd used the last of it during the mad scramble from our house. His daily anxiety meds were gone too. The small orange prescription bottle rattled emptily when Meredith shook it. "He needs his medication," I said, forcing my voice level. "We have to find a pharmacy. Otherwise, this could turn into a full-blown—" I stopped myself from saying asthma attack in front of Tanner, not wanting to escalate his panic. "Are you serious?" Meredith hissed, glaring up at me with red-rimmed eyes. "Look around, Jeremy. The whole city is falling apart. The military is shooting people. That thing in the church just—" She swallowed hard. "Where exactly do you think we're going to find an open CVS?" A primal part of me wanted to scream back at her, to release the helpless rage building in my chest since this nightmare began. Instead, I took a slow breath, tasting the metallic tang of fear in the back of my throat. "We passed a strip mall 3 blocks back," I said quietly. "Had a Walgreens on the corner. Most of the front was smashed in, but the pharmacy section might still be intact." Meredith's shoulders slumped. After 12 years of marriage, I recognized when she conceded a point without admitting I was right. "Fine, but we stick to the alleys. No main streets. And at the first sign of trouble, any trouble, we run. Understand?" Alexis hoisted her backpack higher, determination hardening her features. "I'll scout ahead. My track coach says I'm quieter than you two." For once, I didn't argue. My teenage daughter's reflexes were sharper than mine, her hearing more acute. Crouching low, we slipped deeper into the labyrinth of back alleys and service corridors, hunting for medicine in the husk of a city that seemed less human with each passing hour. The faded Rite Aid sign hung crooked above a jagged hole where the automatic doors had been. Half the fluorescent letters in the 24/7 pharmacy sign inside had been shot out, leaving only HAR glowing weakly in the gloom. "This is our best shot," I muttered, more to convince myself than anyone else. My throat felt like I'd swallowed steel wool. "Gosh," Meredith breathed, her arm tightening around Tanner's shoulders. "It looks like something from The Walking Dead." I squeezed through the gap where the sliding doors had been, my shirt catching on a shard of glass that sliced through the fabric. "Watch the edges," I warned. "Step where I step." The stench hit me first, a nauseating cocktail of spilled cough syrup, crushed pill powder, and something underneath that hinted at spoiled meat. An entire display of Maybelline cosmetics had been upended. Crushed compacts of blush and eyeshadow ground into colorful dust beneath frantic feet. "Don't touch anything unless you absolutely have to," I said, stepping over a child's abandoned backpack, My Little Pony stained with something dark, and a pile of shattered Tylenol bottles. "And watch that beam. It looks ready to—" "Dad." Alexis cut me off in a stage whisper, pointing to a toppled first aid display. "Look, There's still stuff here." She darted toward it before I could stop her, dropping to her knees beside a red plastic box with a white cross emblazoned on the lid. The air shifted. A metallic groan emanated from the damaged ceiling. "Lexi, don't—" The words died in my throat as I lunged forward, pure parental instinct propelling me across the debris-strewn floor. My fingers closed around her wrist, yanking her backward with such force that we both sprawled onto the filthy linoleum. Crack. The sound reverberated through the store as the beam gave way, bringing a cascade of plaster, insulation, and splintered wood down exactly where Alexis had been kneeling seconds before. A plume of chalky dust engulfed us, coating my tongue with the taste of pulverized drywall and fiberglass. For 3 hammering heartbeats, I couldn't speak. My mind projected a high-definition image of what would have happened. Alexis's skull crushed beneath 500 pounds of metal, her green eyes vacant and fixed. The vision was so vivid I had to blink hard to dispel it. I clutched her to me, feeling her ribs expand against mine as she coughed out a lungful of dust. "You okay?" I finally managed, my voice a croak. "Are you hurt? Anything hit you?" She pulled back, her face streaked with dust except for clean tracks where tears had cut through. "I'm okay," she wheezed. Your arm's bleeding." I glanced down at a new gash on my forearm, probably from our fall. It stung, but was nothing compared to the churning relief in my gut. "It's fine," I said, helping her up. "Just stay with me, okay? No more rushing ahead." Meredith appeared at my side, Tanner half hidden behind her. "You two all right?" Her voice was steady, but the muscle in her jaw twitched. Her tell when she was keeping iron control over her emotions. "We're good," I answered, still gripping Alexis's shoulder. The dust was settling around us, revealing an even more chaotic scene than before. But the path to the pharmacy counter remained clear. I hoisted myself over the counter, landing with a crunch on scattered pill bottles and prescription labels. I found 3 Ventolin inhalers still in their boxes, a half-full bottle of Xanax that had rolled under a shelf, and, miracle of miracles, an unopened package of antibiotics that might help with my wound. "Jackpot," I whispered, shoving the supplies into my pockets. Someone up there was finally cutting us a break. That's when I heard it. The distinctive sound of a rifle bolt being drawn back, followed by heavy footsteps moving with unnatural precision. I froze, barely breathing, and peered through a gap in the shelving. 3 figures in military tactical gear moved through the front of the store, their movements oddly synchronized. Not the fluid motions of trained soldiers, but disjointed spastic bursts, as if they were marionettes controlled by an unskilled puppeteer. Their faces were obscured by gas masks, black tubes extending from the respirators like proboscises. "Secure the area," one of them said, the words stretched and distorted as if struggling with human speech. "Locate survivors for assimilation." Another soldier tilted his head, his neck seeming to extend several inches. "Feed instructions to control node." The gas mask muffled his voice, giving it a mechanical buzzing quality. "Subject resistance is futile." An icy sweat broke out across my back. These weren't National Guard or regular army. They weren't even human anymore, at least not entirely. Whatever intelligence inhabited those bodies was using them like borrowed suits. I slid back to where Meredith and the kids huddled behind the counter. "We've got company," I mouthed, gesturing toward the front of the store. Alexis's eyes widened. "Soldiers?" she mouthed back. I shook my head slightly. How could I explain that these things only looked like soldiers? "Not exactly," I breathed against her ear. "But they have guns. We need to stay absolutely silent." Tanner pressed his face against Meredith's shoulder, his small body trembling violently. She curled around him protectively, her eyes questioning me. "How do we get out?" I pointed to a door marked "Employees Only" at the back of the pharmacy. If we were lucky, it might lead to a stockroom or loading dock with an exit. Heavy boots crunched over broken glass, moving methodically through each aisle, getting closer. I motioned for the others to crawl toward the back door, my heart slamming against my ribs so hard I was sure the sound would give us away. We detect respiration and cardiac functions, one of the not soldiers announced, his rifle sweeping in our general direction. Reveal yourselves for processing. Meredith and the kids had almost reached the door when Tanner's foot caught an empty metal shelf, sending it clattering to the floor with a crash that sounded like a gunshot in the tense silence. Surrender, or be terminated, the lead soldier barked, his voice glitching between syllables like a corrupted audio file. No time for stealth now. Run! I shouted, shoving Meredith and the kids toward the back door as bullets chewed through the shelving around us. I flung open the door, half pushing my family through into a narrow corridor lit by a single emergency light that bathed everything in sickly green. The cinder-block walls were slick with condensation, and the air reeked of industrial cleaner and rat droppings. Go, I urged, Tanner's small hand clutched in mine as we raced toward the red exit sign at the far end. His asthmatic wheezing cut through me like a blade. We needed to get him that inhaler the second we found safety. More gunfire behind us, bullets pinging off metal shelving and thudding into the walls. I felt rather than heard a round whip past my ear, disturbing the air with a supersonic crack. Alexis reached the exit first, throwing her weight against the push bar. The door swung open, flooding the corridor with harsh afternoon light. We burst out into a narrow alleyway lined with dumpsters and wooden pallets. The smell of rotting vegetables from the adjacent supermarket made my empty stomach lurch. This way, Alexis called, darting between obstacles with the natural agility of a teenager. Meredith followed, pulling Tanner along. I brought up the rear, constantly checking behind us. White-hot pain suddenly lanced through my upper arm, spinning me half around. The sensation was so specific, like someone had pressed a superheated poker against my bicep, the flesh sizzling on contact. I stumbled, nearly dropping to one knee, my vision narrowing to a pinpoint. "Dad's hit!" Alexis screamed, her voice seeming to come from miles away. "Mom, Dad's been shot." Meredith was at my side in an instant, her arm sliding under mine to support my weight. "How bad?" she demanded, her eyes scanning my body for catastrophic damage. "Just a graze," I managed, though each heartbeat sent a fresh wave of agony through the wound. Warm blood trickled down my arm, soaking through my shirt sleeve and dripping from my fingertips in a morbid trail. "Keep moving." We half ran, half staggered to the end of the alley, finally ducking behind a rust-pitted Ford F-150 that had been abandoned with one wheel up on the curb. My legs gave out, and I slid down against the truck's rear tire, leaving a smear of blood on the dirty white paint. Alexis dropped to her knees beside me, her face ashen beneath its freckles. "Let me see," she said, with a composure that seemed impossible for her age. She tugged gently at my tattered sleeve, revealing the 3-inch furrow the bullet had carved through my outer bicep. "It's not too deep," she announced, relief evident in her voice. "Clean through the muscle, no bone." Meredith rummaged through our newly acquired pharmacy supplies, tearing open antiseptic wipes and sterile gauze. "This is going to hurt," she warned, pressing the alcohol-soaked pad directly onto the wound. Pain exploded through my arm, so intense that black spots danced in my vision. I bit down on my own fist to keep from screaming, tasting copper as my teeth broke the skin. The world tilted and swam around me, but I forced myself to stay conscious. Passing out now could be a death sentence. "Like you in Boy Scouts," Meredith's voice filtered back into my awareness. All those first aid badges finally coming in handy. I managed a weak chuckle as she tied off a surprisingly professional-looking bandage. "Eagle Scout," I corrected, my voice hoarse. Never thought I'd need to know how to treat a gunshot wound. We paused, listening for pursuit, but the alley behind us remained quiet. Maybe the not soldiers had given up, or maybe they'd found easier prey. Tanner huddled against me, his small frame still shaking. I fumbled in my pocket for his inhaler, pressing it into his palm. "Here you go, buddy. 2 puffs, just like Dr. Rosen showed you." He took the medicine gratefully, his breathing easing almost immediately. The panic medication would take longer to work, but at least we had it now. One less thing to worry about in a world that had become a cascading series of terrors. "We need a better plan than just running from place to place," Meredith said, wiping blood, my blood, from her hands onto her jeans. "Somewhere secure to regroup, figure out next steps." That's when I remembered. "David Reese," I said, the name popping into my head like a lifeline. "My billionaire client, the tech guy." "The one with the weird art collection?" Alexis asked, recognition dawning. "Yeah. He has an estate up in Bel Air. Gated, private security, the works." I shifted, wincing as my injured arm protested. He was always going on about his doomsday bunker. I thought he was paranoid, spending millions on a glorified basement. But now, "You think he'd let us in?" Meredith asked, skepticism evident in her tone. I remembered David's ostentatious dinner parties, where he'd drunkenly shown off his apocalypse prep to impressed guests. The 6 months of freeze-dried food, the water filtration system, the military-grade communications equipment. "He likes me," I said, "and he's always had a weird crush on you." Meredith rolled her eyes but didn't deny it. "It's not exactly close by. 2 miles, maybe 3, I estimated, struggling to my feet. My arm throbbed in time with my heartbeat, but the bleeding had slowed to a trickle. The bandage was already feeling tight and hot. "We can make it before dark if we get moving." Alexis helped me up, surprisingly strong for her slender frame. "Might as well try," she said pragmatically. "Beats hiding in dumpsters and getting shot at." We set off again, sticking to side streets and alleyways, avoiding the main thoroughfares where dangers, both human and otherwise, seemed to congregate. As we walked, I noticed more disturbing signs. People wandering with that same unnatural gait we'd seen in the soldiers, sometimes jerky, sometimes an unnerving frictionless glide, strange black residue seeping from storm drains, flocks of birds flying in impossible geometric patterns overhead. The thing from the crater was spreading its influence, corrupting everything it touched. And somehow, I knew with bone-deep certainty, it was only going to get worse. "Dad?" Tanner's voice pulled me from my dark thoughts. "Are we going to be okay?" I looked down at his trusting face, at the freckles sprinkled across his nose just like his mother's, at his cowlick that never would stay flat no matter how much gel we used. I should lie to him. Tell him everything would be fine, the way parents are supposed to protect their children from harsh realities. Instead, I squeezed his shoulder with my good hand. "I don't know, buddy," I admitted, "but we're together, and that means we've got a fighting chance." It wasn't much, but in a world coming apart at the seams, it was the only truth I had left to offer. We rounded the corner onto Stone Canyon Road, where massive Mediterranean-style compounds hid behind privacy hedges and security cameras. David Reese's estate, all $8.5 million of prime Bel Air real estate, stood at the end of a cul-de-sac. "Lord," I muttered, taking in the scene. The Italian cypress trees that had lined the drive, each one probably $5,000 just to install, were uprooted, their root balls exposed like obscene anatomical displays. The Mercedes fountain in the center of the circular drive now spouted rusty-looking water over a dead koi floating belly up. "Something went very wrong here," Alexis whispered, pulling her hoodie tighter despite the afternoon heat. I stepped over the bent gate, helping Tanner navigate the debris. Golden light from the setting sun caught the shattered Swarovski crystal chandelier in the entryway, sending fractured rainbows dancing across walls splattered with something. "Stay behind me," I whispered, picking up a blood-stained Mont Blanc fountain pen from the marble floor. David's prized possession, the one he'd used to sign his first $1 million deal. Now I was considering using it to stab someone with. Funny how priorities change. Blood had been smeared across the imported Italian marble in deliberate patterns, spirals and angles that made my vision blur when I tried to focus on them. They weren't random. They had purpose, mathematical precision that felt deeply wrong. "David?" Meredith called, her voice tight. "It's Meredith and Jeremy Daniels." Silence stretched, then broken by a dull thud from the East Wing, where David kept his ridiculous home theater with the genuine seats from Grauman's Chinese. "Wait here," I told the others, but Meredith shook her head. "Not a chance," she whispered. "We stick together." We moved as a unit toward the sound, passing walls where David's art collection, the Basquiat he'd outbid a Saudi prince for, the small Picasso sketch he'd drunkenly shown me last New Year's, had been defiled with the same oily substance we'd seen throughout the city. The painting frames hung empty, the canvases slashed into precise geometric patterns. A shuffling sound grew louder as we approached the library. I grabbed a fire poker from the antique stand by the Venetian fireplace, testing its weight. Tanner's breathing quickened, and Alexis pulled him closer. We turned the corner and froze. David stood in the center of his library, surrounded by shredded, leather-bound first editions. Harvard Business Review, McKinsey Quarterly, and The Economist lay in confetti around his bare feet. He wore what remained of a custom Tom Ford shirt, now reduced to bloody tatters that revealed his chest. No longer the soft paunch of a desk-bound CEO, but a roadmap of self-inflicted wounds forming the same symbols we'd seen throughout the house. "Jeremy," he said, his voice unnaturally calm. The flat cadence was all wrong. David normally spoke in manic bursts, hands flying, never finishing one thought before starting another. This measured delivery from his slack mouth felt like a stranger using his vocal cords. "You brought your family. How considerate." His once sharp brown eyes had clouded over with a milky film, like cataracts that had developed overnight. When he smiled, his teeth were stained black, as if he'd been drinking ink. "Dave," I said, using the nickname he hated, a test. No reaction. Definitely not David anymore. "What happened here, man?" "Transcendence," he whispered, dragging a fingernail down the wall, leaving a streak of something black and viscous. "The opening. The becoming. You've seen it too, haven't you, Jeremy? The crater. The doorway." My throat constricted. "Dave, we need to use your bunker, just temporarily. You always said if things went south, the bunker." "Yes." His smile widened until I heard the skin at the corners of his mouth crack. "Safe space. Protected space." He gestured toward the hallway with a jerky, puppet-like motion. "Follow." Meredith grabbed my arm, her nails digging in. "I don't trust him," she breathed against my ear. "Neither do I whispered back. "But we need to see that bunker." Then louder, "Girls, hang back a bit. Keep Tanner between you." David led us through the kitchen, sub-zero refrigerator door hanging open, spoiled caviar and foie gras puddling on the Spanish tile, to a pantry with a false back wall. He fumbled at a heavy steel keypad next to the pantry wall, punching in a code. The wall slid open with a pneumatic hiss, revealing a spiral staircase. "Down," David said, pointing. "Safety." I blocked the kids from descending. "Meredith, take them to check the security room just down that hall where we had drinks last Christmas. See if the cameras are working." She nodded, understanding my real message. "Get them away from David." She ushered the kids back, Tanner's wide eyes darting between me and the thing wearing David's skin. David didn't seem to register their departure. He started down the stairs, mumbling in that strange, broken cadence. "Coming. They're coming. Through the gate. Into the world. Beautiful. Terrible. Hungry." I followed at a careful distance, fire poker gripped white knuckle tight. The staircase opened into a bunker that looked like a spread from Architectural Digest, Apocalypse Edition. Polished concrete floors, stainless steel kitchen, Eames loungers beside a fake window screening a loop of ocean waves. The entire back wall housed a bank of monitors, some showing security feeds, others tuned to dead TV stations. David went straight to the main console, flipping switches with jerky precision. The largest screen flickered to life, displaying a high-definition feed of the crater. It looked different now, wider, deeper, with that column of oily darkness pulsing like a malignant heartbeat. "Beautiful," David whispered, pressing his palm against the screen, leaving a smear of black fluid. The gate widens. They come through, first as whispers, then as shadows, then as flesh. "Who's coming, David?" I kept my voice steady, though my heart hammered painfully. He turned to me, that awful cracked smile widening. "The old ones, the waiting ones, the always-have-been ones." Black drool oozed from the corner of his mouth, spattering his torn shirt. "We feed them. We open ourselves. We become vessels." A hydraulic hum started up, the bunker door beginning its automatic closure sequence. David's eyes locked on mine, no longer vacant but burning with terrible purpose. "You'll be perfect," he said, lunging with inhuman speed. "Your family, your minds, so bright, so receptive, such good vessels." I swung the poker without hesitation, catching him across the collarbone with a sickening crack. He staggered but didn't fall, didn't even seem to register pain. Instead, his mouth opened in a soundless scream, those black-stained teeth now impossibly numerous, filling his mouth like a shark's. "Gala naf dran yog sothoth." The words tore from his throat, guttural and wrong, as if his vocal cords weren't designed to produce such sounds. He came at me again, fingers curved into claws. I swung a second time, connecting with his temple. The impact made a wet, splitting sound. David dropped to his knees, black fluid gushing from his ears. But still he kept coming, crawling spider-like across the floor. The bunker door was almost closed. I jammed the poker into the mechanism, metal screaming against metal. Sparks showered onto David's reaching hands, igniting the strange oil seeping from his wounds. Blue flames raced up his arms, but he didn't seem to notice. "Jeremy!" Meredith's panicked voice echoed down the stairwell. "The security system. There are others in the house, moving toward us." I looked back at David, now a burning, crawling thing still mouthing those obscene syllables. The choice was easy. "Coming!" I shouted, squeezing through the gap before the door sealed completely. I took the spiral stairs 2 at a time, my lungs burning, arm throbbing. Meredith stood at the top, face chalk white. "East wing," she gasped. 4 of them, like David, moving fast. Alexis clutched Tanner's hand, the boy trembling violently. "Dad, what's happening to everyone?" No time to answer. I shepherded them toward a side door that led to the pool deck. Behind us, something shattered. Maybe the intruders breaking through the kitchen's French doors. We burst outside into the gathering dusk. The infinity pool stretched before us, its water black and still as a mirror. Beyond it, the crumpled gate stood open. Freedom, or at least temporary escape. A howl rose from the house. Not David's voice, not human at all. It was answered by others, a chorus of alien ululations that raised goosebumps on my arms. "Run," I gasped, pushing my family ahead of me. "Don't look back." We sprinted across the pool deck, through the ruined garden where David had once hosted champagne fundraisers for senators, past the tennis court now covered in those terrible symbols drawn in what looked like blood. The gates loomed ahead, just 50 more yards. Behind us, the house began to glow with an unnatural blue light, like foxfire or St. Elmo's fire, the same color that had consumed David. The howling intensified, becoming a physical force that pressed against my eardrums. We stumbled through the gates just as windows in the east wing exploded outward. Didn't stop running until we reached the main road, where we collapsed against a stone wall, lungs heaving. The fantasy of the bunker, of safety, of walls thick enough to keep out the horror, died behind us. We had nowhere to go except forward, into a night that promised only new terrors. "Where now?" Meredith asked between gasps, her hand finding mine. I stared at the darkening sky, where stars were appearing one by one, cold and distant and uncaring. "Away from the crater," I said finally. "As far as we can get." But even as we trudged down the hillside toward the broken city, I felt the crater's presence like a physical pull. Its whispers tickled the edge of my consciousness. I knew, with soul-deep certainty, that we could run to the ends of the earth and it would still find us. Because once you've seen it, it's seen you too. Night had swallowed Los Angeles by the time we limped back toward downtown. Apartment fires dotted the skyline like malevolent candles, their light catching on broken glass and twisted metal. We picked our way down Figueroa Street, once a bustling corridor of office workers and tourists, now a graveyard of abandoned vehicles. A city bus lay on its side, windows punched out, DTLA Route 76 still displayed on its cracked digital banner. The ground shuddered beneath us, a low-frequency rumble that made my teeth ache. "Aftershock?" Alexis whispered, clutching my sleeve. Her voice carried a desperate hope that this was still just a natural disaster we were facing. I shook my head. "Don't think so." These tremors had rhythm, almost like footfalls, like something massive was walking nearby. We scrambled under a collapsed billboard for some financial app, smiling faces promising wealth now buried in the gutter. The ground vibrated again, stronger this time. A Toyota Camry parked 20 feet away rocked on its chassis, its alarm triggering briefly before dying with a pathetic whine. I thought back to the last radio message we'd heard clearly, the one about code black and psychic interference. "Psychic contamination," I muttered, recalling the phrase. The idea still tasted metallic on my tongue. Like we can just walk out of here through the, psychic roadblocks? Meredith shot me a look that said, not in front of the kids, but they were beyond protection now. Tanner sagged against her side, his eyelids drooping despite the chaos. The inhaler and anxiety meds had pulled him back from the edge, but his small body was running on fumes. Even Alexis, our indestructible teenager, had lost her eye-rolling indifference. She stayed within arm's reach, jumping at every sound. We crossed 7th Street, past a Starbucks where a small group had barricaded themselves inside. I glimpsed them through a gap in the plywood. 3 men and a woman huddled around a camping lantern, dividing up cans of cold brew and protein bars. They tracked our movement with the hollow-eyed wariness of cornered animals. No one called out. No one offered help. We'd all become strangers to each other in less than 24 hours. That's when I saw him, my father, standing under the broken Walgreens sign across the street. Not the father from my childhood memories, but the man from the construction site accident. Hard hat tilted back, thermal lunch cooler in hand, that small coffee stain on his chambray shirt from when I'd bumped his arm at breakfast that final morning. He looked so goddamn real, down to the chipped front tooth that flashed when he smiled at me. My steps faltered. "Dad?" The word escaped before I could catch it. "Jeremy?" Meredith's fingers found my wrist. "What is it?" I blinked hard, and the image wavered, then dissolved into shadow. "Nothing. Just..." I swallowed the knot in my throat. "Let's keep moving." But the hallucinations were only getting stronger. 2 blocks later, Meredith froze, her fingers loosening their grip on Tanner. "Mom?" She took a half step toward a darkened law office entrance. Her voice cracked with longing. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Her mother had died 5 years ago after a brutal 18 months of chemo and radiation, breast cancer that metastasized to her brain. Meredith had held her hand through the final hours, talking about Tanner's Little League games and Alexis's science fair project, while the monitors beeped slower and slower. I caught her sleeve. "There's nobody there, Mer. It's in your head." She blinked rapidly, tears catching the firelight. "She looked so real," she whispered. "She was wearing that blue cardigan I got her for Christmas." "The entity's fishing," I said quietly. "Using what matters most." Alexis's scream sliced through the night. She backpedaled from a section of buckled sidewalk, her Converse sneakers skidding on debris. "The cement, it's turning to quicksand. Dad, it's trying to pull me in." I lunged forward, grabbing her shoulders firmly. "Lexi, look at me, right at me." Her eyes were wild, pupils dilated to black pools. "It's concrete, solid. Watch." I stomped on the spot she'd been avoiding. "See? Not real." She trembled under my hands, tears streaming down her dirt-smudged cheeks. "It looks so real," she whispered, an echo of her mother's words. Tanner wailed, pressing his hands over his ears. "The buildings are getting smaller. They're squishing us." We hustled into a utility access corridor between a bank and an office tower. The narrow passage reeked of piss, but at least it offered temporary shelter from both physical and psychic exposure. Tanner's breathing came in sharp gasps, the beginnings of another panic attack. I crouched in front of him, gently pulling his hands away from his ears. "Hey, buddy, look at me." His eyes darted everywhere but my face. "Tanner, eyes on me." He finally locked onto my gaze, his pupils huge with fear. "The buildings aren't moving. Your mind is playing tricks, but I'm real." I tapped my chest. "Mom is real. Alexis is real. Focus on us, okay? We're your anchors." His chest hitched. "I'm trying," he squeaked, "but everything keeps changing." "I know," I said, surprising myself with my gentleness. "I'm seeing things too, but we can get through this. Together." I smoothed his hair back from his forehead. Such a simple gesture, but when had I last done it? Before all this, I'd been too busy chasing deals, climbing the corporate ladder, squeezing in 18 holes at the country club. Now the world was ending, and I was finally learning how to be a father. We couldn't stay in the alley. The psychic assault was intensifying, and each tremor felt closer, stronger. Alexis spotted it first, an open manhole cover in a service alcove. "Underground," she suggested, her voice stronger now. "Maybe it can't reach us down there." The stench that rose from the opening made my eyes water. Stagnant water, rot, decomposition. But our options were vanishing by the minute. "Damn it," Alexis gagged as we lowered ourselves down the rusted rungs. "It smells like the time Grandpa's septic tank backed up." Somehow, her teenage disgust was the most normal thing I'd experienced all day. I smiled despite everything. The tunnels beneath Los Angeles formed a labyrinthine network, storm drains feeding into larger channels, maintenance corridors running alongside ancient brick sewers. Our phone flashlights carved weak cones of light through the thick darkness. We sloshed through ankle-deep water that I tried not to think about too much. But down here, the psychic static faded. No more visions of my father. No more buildings closing in. Either the entity couldn't penetrate this deep, or the concrete and earth above us formed some kind of barrier. My arm throbbed with each heartbeat, the bullet graze hot and swollen now. Infection setting in. I kept that knowledge to myself, popping another antibiotic from our pharmacy stash. We trudged for what felt like miles, guided by the faded maintenance markings on the walls. Tanner's face had relaxed somewhat, free from the constant assault of hallucinations. Meredith took the lead, her background in city planning giving her a better sense of where these tunnels might lead. My stomach cramped with hunger. When had we last eaten anything substantial? We finished the last protein bar hours ago. Our water was desperately low. The murky tunnel runoff was unthinkable. After perhaps an hour, we found a utility ladder that led to a heavy metal hatch. I climbed up first, muscles screaming in protest, and pushed it open with my good shoulder. We emerged into the ghostly silence of the 7th Street Metro Center station. Emergency lighting bathed the platform in a dim red glow. The electronic arrivals board still flickered with frozen information. Union Station 7 minutes. Wilshire Western 12 minutes. A newspaper stand had been ransacked. Celebrity gossip magazines scattered across the tiles in a surreal reminder of the world we'd lost in a day. "Look," Alexis pointed to the wall map. "If we follow the purple line, it goes northwest, away from the crater, maybe even under it." I studied the schematic. She was right. The subway tunnels might offer a path beneath the worst of the madness above, or straight into the heart of it, Meredith countered softly. She gestured toward a subway car sitting abandoned on the track, its doors pried open. Why is no one else down here if it's so safe? Before I could answer, a sound echoed from the tunnel. A rapid click, 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 like fingernails tapping on concrete. It grew louder, then faded, replaced by a soft, wet, slithering noise. Alexis edged closer to me. What was that? Probably just water in the tunnels, I lied. The truth was, I had no idea. It could have been another survivor. It could have been building systems powering down. Or it could have been something entirely different. Something that had no business existing in our reality. I glanced at my family. Filthy, exhausted, terrified, but alive. The decision wasn't really a decision at all. We're running out of options, I said quietly. These tunnels go deep and might take us beyond the contamination zone. It's the best shot we have. We climbed down onto the tracks, helping Tanner navigate the third rail that thankfully no longer hummed with lethal current. The tunnel mouth gaped before us like the throat of some enormous beast. Our flashlight beams barely penetrated its depths. I took Tanner's hand, feeling his small fingers grip mine with surprising strength. Meredith flanked his other side, while Alexis stayed close behind me. Together, we stepped into the darkness, the tunnel swallowing the sound of our footfalls. I tried to silence the voice in my head that whispered we were walking deeper into the belly of something incomprehensible, that perhaps there was no escaping what had torn open our reality, that the darkness ahead might hold something far worse than what we'd left behind. But what choice did we have? My family was my world now, the only reality that mattered in a city of disintegrating certainties. I'd carry them through this darkness or die trying. The purple-lined tunnel stretched ahead, the tracks vanishing into darkness. A derailed maintenance cart blocked half the tunnel about 50 yards in, tools scattered like abandoned toys. Feels like we're being watched, Alexis whispered, her voice bouncing off the curved walls despite her attempt to stay quiet. She kept glancing over her shoulder, the blue streaks in her hair now matted with sweat and grime. Tanner stumbled over a broken rail tie, and I steadied him with my good arm. "Careful, bud," I murmured, sweeping my flashlight beam ahead. The light caught a maintenance door with its sign half torn. "Authorized personnel only." Rust had fused the hinges solid. "Look," Meredith said, pointing her light at the wall. Someone had spray-painted a message in hurried, dripping letters. They're in my head. Next to it, in different handwriting, "Open your eyes to see them." The paint looked fresh, still glossy in spots. Below these, someone had used what looked like blood to draw a crude spiral with an eye at its center. "That one's still wet," Meredith said, her voice tight. "You think people have been down here since—" Alexis gestured vaguely upward, toward the broken city. "Or they never left," I replied, remembering the Los Angeles urban legends about tunnel dwellers, the homeless communities that supposedly lived in the drainage network. I'd dismissed those stories as exaggerations. Now I wondered if they'd had the right idea all along. Then a noise stopped us cold, rhythmic chanting echoing from somewhere ahead. The words were indistinct but had a sing-song quality, like a nursery rhyme twisted into something sinister. Was that behind us or in front of us? Alexis whispered, clutching her backpack straps. "Hard to tell," I said. "Sound plays tricks down here." The chanting faded, replaced by the steady drip of water and our own breathing. We pressed on, passing another section of graffiti that simply read, "Let it in foot-high red letters, with dozens of tally marks beneath it. After what felt like another mile, our beams caught movement ahead. Flashlights bobbing in the darkness at a junction where our tunnel intersected with another line. I extended my arm, stopping my family mid-step. "Stay here," I whispered, but Meredith grabbed my wrist. "No way," she hissed. "We stick together." We approached slowly. The junction opened into a wider area where the tracks split. A group had set up camp there, pallets arranged in a rough circle, surrounded by shopping carts filled with scavenged supplies. 5 people huddled around a Coleman lantern, its propane hiss cutting through the subterranean silence. They spotted us before we could retreat. A man with a shaggy salt and pepper beard scrambled to his feet, aiming a revolver in our direction. His plaid flannel shirt was torn at the shoulder, revealing a makeshift bandage beneath. "That's far enough," he barked, his voice strained and hoarse. "Hands where I can see 'em." I raised my palms slowly, stepping slightly in front of my family. "We don't want trouble," I called. "We've got kids with us, just trying to find a way through." The bearded man's aim wavered slightly as he took in Tanner's small form. "Nobody comes through here without Vic's say-so," he said, but with less conviction. An older man with wispy white hair peered at us from behind a shopping cart. "Where you headed?" he asked, his Boston accent thick despite his obvious exhaustion. "Away from the crater," I replied honestly. "Trying to get beyond whatever this is." The old man, Kevin I'd later learn, laughed, a dry sound like crumpling newspaper. "Can't get round it, friend. Tried that myself. It's not just in one spot. It's everywhere now. In the air, in the water." He tapped his temple with a trembling finger. "In here." "Shut up, Kev," the bearded man snapped. To us, he said, "Look, we got limited supplies. Can't take on more people. Turn around, find another route." Meredith took a small step forward, hands still visible. "We won't touch your supplies. We just need to pass through. There are 4 of us, 2 children." A heavy-set woman with close-cropped gray hair scoffed from her seat on an overturned bucket. "They'll bring it right to us," she muttered. "The darkness follows people. Tracks them like bloodhounds." I was about to respond when Meredith gasped beside me. "Your neck," she said to the bearded man, pointing. "You're infected." The man's free hand flew to his throat, where dark lines had begun to branch beneath his skin like black lightning. He hadn't noticed it himself, judging by the look of horror that flashed across his face. "Marcus?" The woman rose from her bucket, taking a step back. "Oh, Jesus, no." Kevin backed up too, bumping into their supply cart. "I told you," he cried, voice cracking. "Told you we shouldn't have gone topside. It's in all of us now." Marcus, the bearded man, swung his gun toward Kevin, his hand now visibly trembling. I said, "Shut up," but his voice changed mid-sentence, dropping an octave and developing a strange harmonic, as if 2 people were speaking at once. The black veins pulsed, spreading visibly up his jaw toward his eyes. "Move now." I shoved my family toward a maintenance passage to our right. Behind us, Marcus dropped to his knees, the gun clattering to the tracks as his body bent backward. His scream echoed through the tunnels, a sound that started human but warped into something that raised the hair on my neck. It wasn't affecting everyone the same way, I realized with a jolt. Kellerman and Chen were like sleepwalkers, but Tanya, the priest, this guy Marcus, it hit them faster, harder, like a switch flipping under stress. "Don't look back," I urged, half carrying Tanner as we scrambled down the side passage. "Just move." Alexis chanced a glance over her shoulder. "Dad, the others, they're not following us." "They can't," Meredith said grimly, yanking her forward. "Did you see his neck? Just like Father Rodney before he—" She didn't need to finish. We'd all seen what had happened to the priest, how quickly the transformation had taken hold. The memory spurred us faster through the narrow maintenance tunnel, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly off the walls. This tunnel was different. Older brick rather than concrete, with pipes running along the ceiling. Something glistened on the walls here, an oily black substance that collected in the mortar lines between bricks. As our light swept over it, the substance seemed to retreat, pulling back like a living thing avoiding exposure. "Don't touch the walls," I warned, noticing how the slick patches pulsed faintly, like something breathing. A soft whisper traveled through the tunnel, not carried by the air, but somehow transmitted through the bricks themselves. It wasn't quite words, more like the susurration of dry leaves, but with a rhythm that suggested language. Sometimes it seemed to come from directly behind us, other times from far ahead. Tanner whimpered, pressing his hands over his ears. "Make it stop, Daddy. It's saying my name." I couldn't hear my son's name in the whispers, but a chill ran through me at the thought that he could. The entity was getting stronger, its reach extending. Or maybe we were getting closer to its source. My vision blurred from exhaustion, my legs moving on autopilot. Time lost meaning in the darkness. We might have been walking for minutes or hours. The pain in my arm had become a constant scream that I pushed to the background of my awareness. Then Alexis grabbed my sleeve. "Look," she said, pointing ahead. A faint grayish light filtered down from above, illuminating a section of collapsed tunnel. The roof had given way, creating a rough slope of broken concrete and twisted rebar that led upward to what looked like daylight. "An exit," Meredith breathed, hope threading through her voice for the first time in hours. I squinted up at the opening. "We might be close to the crater," I cautioned. "The psychic effects could be stronger above ground." "Does it matter?" Meredith asked, exhaustion evident in the slump of her shoulders. "We can't stay down here forever. We're running out of water, food, flashlight batteries." She was right. We were operating on borrowed time. Whatever waited above couldn't be worse than slowly dying in these tunnels. "Okay," I decided. "But stay close together. Focus on each other if the visions start again." We picked our way up the debris pile, helping each other over jagged chunks of concrete. The light grew stronger as we climbed. It didn't look quite like normal daylight. Too yellow, with an unnatural haze that scattered the rays into visible beams. With each step upward, I felt a growing pressure behind my eyes, a buzzing sensation at the base of my skull. The whispers grew more insistent, and though I still couldn't make out words, I sensed meaning behind them, an invitation, a beckoning. Come see, come join, come home. Part of me, a small, curious part that felt increasingly foreign, wanted to answer that call, to follow it to its source, to finally understand what had torn our world apart. But then Tanner's hand slipped into mine, his small fingers squeezing with complete trust, and the spell shattered. I gripped him back, anchoring myself to what mattered. Whatever waited above, we would face it together. That's the end of this story. If you enjoyed the video, please consider subscribing to the channel. It would help me out more than you can imagine. I appreciate you, and I'll see you soon.